Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror film named Laid to Rest Part 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. As shown in the first part, as soon as the two victims, Princess and Tommy, escape for their dear life, the police arrive at the crime scene more quickly than expected. It turns out there is a mole within the police force. A man wearing leather gloves takes down his colleagues with 2 shots and then orders his team to carry away the masked killer's body. As a professional team, they even brought an ambulance. The doctors waste no time and immediately start to resuscitate the killer, pulling him back from the brink of death, and the mask is put into a freezer. Meanwhile, the henchman named Preston spots a missing cell phone, deducing that it must be with one of the survivors. He and his team split up and followed the survivor's location. It is a motel not far from the convenience store. Tommy has Princess rest in a room while he goes out to buy supplies for her. Princess rushes to the bathroom to wash up her bloody body, but soon after, Preston finds her. The sudden sound of a text message terrifies her, and just as she tries to escape, she is gagged. Preston, wielding a sharp knife, tries to negotiate with Princess, but as soon as he releases her, she starts screaming like a chicken. Preston slashes her mouth open, making it even wider to avoid any loud chicken voices. Astonished by his own work, Preston takes a photo with his phone. Princess is in so much pain that she is numb, and she can't even scream when the knife pierces her abdomen. Preston twists the knife, ending her life. When Tommy returns with food, he finds Princess disemboweled and hidden under the covers, making him vomit uncontrollably and call the police for help. On the other side, doctors are playing a puzzle game, trying to piece together the masked killer's shattered face. He had lost a significant amount of skin tissue, and even his eyes had to be reassembled. The killer recalls his first encounter with a dead body. The cold touch felt eerie, and from then on he became infatuated with the sensation, leading to his downward spiral. The surgery is a great success, and the doctors receive a large sum of money as compensation. Preston then visits the masked killer, who is actually the boss of the criminal organization. He tells him that he had killed the escaped girl, Princess, for him. However, the killer becomes emotional upon hearing this news, tearing the blanket covering him. It seems the killer enjoyed the chase in the first part and was reluctant to end Princess's life. Meanwhile, the police can't determine Princess's identity. Although they find the second cell phone, it doesn't provide any useful clues. The case reaches a deadlock for the time being. After 3 months, the killer recovers. Looking at the oozing face in the mirror, he angrily shatters it. The assistant hears the noise and appears with a mask. In order to boost the killer's morale, she finds a new videotape featuring a sweet-smiling blonde girl named Jess. Seeing the boss's interest, the assistant goes to Preston's office, where he's investigating Tommy, the survivor. He is ambitious, seemingly wanting to replace his own boss and become the new leader of the organization. At this time, Jess is unaware that she is being targeted. She is still nervous about her upcoming eye surgery next week. Her best friend, Bunhead, comes to accompany her. The girls laugh and play at home, unaware that danger is approaching. Bunhead doesn't notice the silver mask outside the door and happily goes upstairs to make popcorn. The masked killer sneaks towards the kitchen, and when Bunhead discovers the intruder, she screams for help. Unfortunately, the music is too loud for Jess to hear. Seeing the killer playing with a dagger, Bunhead pulls out a hoe to resist, but the killer doesn't give her a chance. The thrown dagger hits her left face. Bunhead falls to the ground, convulsing. Although Jess's vision is blurry, she sees a stranger in her house and screams while retreating. Luckily, the killer doesn't attack her immediately. By the time the police chief and his team arrive, there is only one body left in the house. Jess's whereabouts are unknown, having been taken away by someone. The police analyze Jess's phone and find a fleeting image of a silver mask in a video, which is very similar to the previous case. The police once again locate Tommy, who was traumatized by the previous event. He spends every day in his room watching old videos. His roommate's noisy music irritates him, so he puts on headphones and misses his roommate's piercing scream. The masked killer follows the roommate while he fetches the newspaper and kills him upstairs. Tommy senses something is wrong when the noise next door suddenly stops. He wants to knock on the door to check, but he senses the danger and begins to run. The police arrive just in time, and Tommy manages to escape by a hair. The police examine the footage captured by Jess. Though the mask is blurry, Tommy will never forget it in his lifetime. He recalls the mask's features, which appear to be made with chrome plating. The police chief quickly follows this lead and soon identifies a factory not far from the crime scene. However, they are unaware that the killer is not acting alone, but is part of a well-equipped team. They are manufacturing equipment in the abandoned factory, where the missing Jess is locked in a coffin. Preston, who has only gone to find Tommy and hasn't kidnapped Jess himself, seems to indicate that the real masked killer is back in action. But Preston has also become infatuated with the feeling of killing and no longer wants to take orders from anyone, especially his boss. He has the workers make weapons for him, preparing to replace his boss at any moment. The boss is very dissatisfied with his attitude and cuts off communication. Jess shivers in fear nearby as Preston vents his frustrations to her and eventually threatens his prey. His weapon is ready and the police who come to investigate become his test subjects. He picks up the freshly made mask and goes hunting like his boss did. Jess takes the opportunity to escape from the coffin and search around, only to find all the doors locked. She remembers her phone in her pocket, but there's some interference in the factory. As soon as she dials a number, a loud noise comes from the speakers above her head. Afraid of being discovered by the criminals, she hurriedly hangs up. But Preston doesn't have time to deal with Jess right now. He's busy dealing with the police in the factory. The policewoman doesn't notice the mask flashing behind her, and while she's investigating a license plate on the ground, Preston grabs her and pulls her down. The custom-made dagger spins rapidly, and the policewoman is distracted before she can fire a shot in retaliation. Facing the approaching criminal, she crawls up the stairs, but the killer leisurely follows, his disc-like dagger blocking her path. He lifts her hair and presses her head towards the knife tip. Jess witnesses everything on the surveillance monitor. The brutal scene sends chills down her spine. The policewoman impaled on the knife tip is not dead yet, but Preston steps on her head and presses down forcefully. The boss is watching everything closely, realizing that he needs to deal with the internal strife in his team before hunting his prey. As the criminal cleans up the body, Jess hurriedly sends a message to her mother. At this moment, her mother has already arrived at the police station. Everyone tries to locate the signal through technology, but before they can lock onto the target, Tommy disappears. Surveillance footage shows that he was taken away from the police station by someone. As everyone is at a loss, Preston has already brought Tommy back to the factory. Jess pleads with him to let her go, saying she can't see anything and has no way to identify the killer. However, Preston is considering whether to hand her over to his boss in order to flex his work. He believes that the victims are not afraid of the chrome mask, but the person wearing it, so he wants to replace his boss and enjoy the thrill of the game. All of this is overheard by the boss as his assistant helps him get ready. He prepares to take matters into his own hands and teach Preston a lesson. Meanwhile, the police receive another emergency call. Tommy's roommate's body is found in the opposite direction. To save time, the police chief sends his men to investigate in two groups and instructs them not to act rashly. Preston negotiates with his boss while holding Tommy, trying to prove that he can do better than him. But Preston is fired on the spot because Preston has been copycatting and undermining the boss. This humiliates Preston, so he wants to make his boss regret this decision. He then tells Jess that he will come back to play games with them later on. After that, the boss is dressed neatly, kissing the body of the dead girl from the previous film. He puts on the mask from the table and the dagger in the box gleams. He's ready to settle accounts with Preston. However, Preston is not in a hurry. In order to perfect his imitation, he even finds a tattoo artist to ink an upgraded design on his chest. This gives the two hostages more time to escape. They help each other untie ropes and handcuffs. Jess, still not understanding the situation, screams when she sees the dismembered bodies in other coffins. Tommy picks up a flashlight and looks for an exit, but the room is sealed off with no escape route. Jess hands her phone to Tommy and tells him that there are speakers everywhere in the factory and the signal will be interfered with. Fortunately, Tommy finds a hidden entrance in the ground. They use a coffin to disguise it, and since Jess has poor eyesight, Tommy decides to explore the underground space himself. The underground space is very limited, and the two mummified bodies in the corner make him retch. Although he doesn't find an exit, he manages to make a successful emergency call. By this time, Preston has completed his tattoo, but he is not satisfied. In order to look exactly like his boss, he even shaves his head bald. After making contact with the police chief, Tommy sees a glimmer of hope. The police are locating their position, and the two officers arrive near the factory. They find the car of their previous colleague and report to the chief. The bald officer, however, decides to go in and investigate directly. The partner cautions him not to act rashly, but the bald officer won't listen. The alarm goes off again as he breaks the lock and enters the factory. The partner fears for his safety and reluctantly follows him inside. He finds a blood trail on the ground, but fails to notice the masked killer in the corner. As the two men communicate with each other, another killer appears behind the partner. There is no response from his partner on the other end because the bald officer has just been stabbed through the mouth. The walkie-talkie emits a screeching noise, and realizing he is in danger, the partner wants to help. However, another masked killer appears in the flickering light. He whistles cheerfully as he cleaves the head sideways. On the other side, the boss is ruthless, cutting the head open like a watermelon. Tommy knows they can't leave the room, so he pries open the iron gate. Although it doesn't seem like the safest place, it's the best plan he can think of for now. Tommy reattaches the iron chain, trying to use it to buy time. Preston returns first, his dagger scraping sparks on the wire fence. The police chief has already locked onto their location and is rushing to the scene, but Preston acts faster. He taunts Tommy until the sharp blade pierces his shoulder. Soon after, the boss makes a dazzling entrance, and with little effort, he drags Preston to his side and hangs him on the wire fence without saying a word, completely ignoring Preston's chicken cries. Intimidated by the boss's actions, Preston finally starts to beg for mercy, but the boss is infuriated by his ugly tattoo and uses the chain to strangle Preston's neck. The dagger in his hand strikes swiftly, like cutting vegetables, and soon Preston is decapitated. The two victims are scared witless by the swinging head. Jess grips the iron axe and roars like a goose, but the masked killer, the boss, is amused and turns off the lights, plunging the room into darkness. Flames flicker on the wire fence as Jess screams in fear. Her extreme panic causes her limbs to go weak, and she drops the flashlight to the ground, which rolls away. Despite the danger, she insists on picking it up. The killer appears behind Tommy unnoticed, and just as Jess finds the flashlight, he breaks through the fence and grabs Tommy by the neck. In a desperate moment, Jess lifts a spiked club and knocks the killer down, but the dagger in the killer's hand has already stabbed Tommy. With the fence broken, Jess screams and prepares to run away. The iron chain on the door buys her some time, but the dagger thrown by the killer pierces her thigh. Jess doesn't get far before the killer catches up with her. As she is about to fall into a dangerous situation, the injured Tommy steps in and repeatedly stabs the masked killer with the dagger. The mask falls off again during the struggle, and Tommy is so frightened by the hideous face that he can't speak. Jess continues to scream as if waiting for the killer to attend to her. Because she missed the best opportunity to escape, the killer picks her heavy body up and forces her back into the coffin. The killer pokes small holes in the coffin and, just like before, records the prey's movements with a camcorder. As soon as the police chief enters, he hears Jess's piercing screams. He orders his men to cut the power and searches for Jess's whereabouts. However, splitting up in the factory is undoubtedly a mistake. Someone finds the masked killer first, but all three of them underestimate his brutality. One of them is taken hostage by the killer, who isn't afraid of the police's guns since no one has fired a shot. One of them finally remembers to pull the trigger, but it's too late. The killer has already gained the upper hand. The officer who fired the gun is slammed onto a wall hook, while another's head is forced down onto an iron axe. The killer takes out 3 people in a row, making the scene extremely bloody and cruel. Jess continues to struggle. The violent shaking knocks the iron buckle open, and she pushes the coffin with all her strength, accidentally knocking down the killer. Seeing him trying to get up, Jess grabs a nearby weapon and swings it down. Due to her blurred vision, she can only hide in a corner. The police chief's voice sounds from outside, and when she sees the killer leaving, she finds tape to wrap around her leg wound. The police chief is unaware of the lurking danger and is attacked by a knife. The criminal drags the man to a chrome-plated machine. The pool water churns violently as he moves, and the metal gradually stretches the skin on the man's face. At this point, the police chief is also injured and falls to the ground. Jess picks up a nearby camera to attract the killer's attention. As expected, the killer is enraged by her smashing the machine, and the police chief escapes death. But Jess is now in danger. The killer chases after Jess, who is already hidden in the basement. The two search for each other in the pitch black. As the killer's figure sways in front of her, she lifts a rock and knocks him down. The two fall to the ground and wrestle muscles with each other. Just as Jess is about to be strangled by the killer, she uses a lighter to set his face on fire, causing the killer to let go. So Jess quickly crawls towards the exit. However, the killer follows closely, grabbing her sexy body back. Fortunately, the police chief arrives in time to pull Jess out of the basement, and the gun finally comes into play. The two stagger outside as reinforcements arrive, and Jess is taken to rest in a car. But things don't seem to be that simple. The killer in the basement gets up again, and even the case files are taken away by an accomplice. The masked killer hasn't given up on the fleeing Jess, and before that, he starts searching for his next target on the streets. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.